Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Black Nerds Matter, where we highlight the brilliance, passion, and stories of Black professionals in STEM and beyond. Today, we're joined by Leroy Green III, also known as Elroy, Lee, or Mr. Leroy, depending on who you ask, a proud native of downtown Newport. Leroy is a social scientist with a background in communication studies and rhetoric analysis from the University of Virginia's College at Wise, currently working in international government relations for a nonprofit focused on ocean conservation. Leroy's journey into this space is unique, coming in with no prior connection to the ocean, but embracing the challenge of it head on. He previously worked as a port community liaison in Hampton Roads, Virginia, advocating for ocean justice in his own community. Beyond his work, he's a storyteller, a thespian with 2 acting credits, and an advocate for science communication, neurodiversity, and the Black experience in marine science. Now pursuing a master's and PhD in science communication, Leroy is developing an ocean justice storytelling web series to bring these important narratives to life. Today, we're diving into his journey, his thoughts on the importance of science communication, and what it means to be a Black nerd. Leroy, welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate it. It's always good to find company with my fellow think-alikes, as they say.
Yeah, you ever seen the movie? I'm trying to think of it. Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon. Snap! When they had like that OP sword, and there was like those two like ninjas, and it was like these two like women ninjas, and she was like picking different like fighting utensils because she had like the OP sword.
I'm trying to think if I'm thinking of the right movie, but there was one movie where no, it's the Last Dragon. The Last Dragon's the name. They have a martial artist. His name's Leroy Green. You seen that movie?
I have gotten the whole Bushido Brown, the whole Kiss My Sneakers ever since high school. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that one. Leroy. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, I had to. It was funny because I was talking to my parents about the different guests I had, and then I said your name, and they're like Leroy Green, like from the Last Dragon. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna ask him. I'm like, I'm sure either he knows that movie, he's tired of comparisons, he's been hearing that his entire life, or he's never heard of it before. I'm like, there's like gonna be no
Gym
in
teacher
between.
used to be like, Bruce Leroy. Every
Yeah.
time. That one or the Leroy Jenkins. That whole clip. I used to get both of those growing up.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask that. I was wondering, but you just said something about you used to get that growing up. So we know you're from Newport News. How was that growing up, and how did that influence the career that you're having now?
There's a lot of ways I could go into exactly how that shaped. To paint the best picture, I want to say that I grew up very isolated. When I say isolated, classic, you can't go past this tree, you can't go past that tree, right? And Newport News is a very diverse in thinking, not always diverse in ethnicity. So in downtown Newport News, it's a predominantly Black community. And with it are a lot of people that may not always get the opportunities to showcase their brilliance. So if you were to re-enter those communities, you'll tell yourself, man, that guy has like a lot of potential, or she may have like a lot of potential, but it was just never materialized or realized. And that's kind of been like the constant theme of Newport News. Like there's so much potential there. And of course, there's a track of people that we gravitate to that made it out of downtown Newport News. So that would be like Michael Vick, right, for example, or Bubba Chuck, or Allen Iverson, as we would call it. Even
Hmm.
people that went to Hampton University that may not be from Newport News directly, like Antoine Bethea or Tyrod Taylor, who was an NFL quarterback. But growing up for me, I've always been at the mercy of being an observer because I couldn't go past two trees. So looking across the street, you see kids like engaging and all those things. But my parents like, you can't go across the street. So it was very isolated, but the things I was exposed to were a lot of the early sociological issues that most people come aware of as they start building their career with a community background.
So when did you realize there was more for you outside of your town where you grew up? Was it going to school, or what? When did that whole part where you want to educate and touch the greater world hit you?
I'm gonna keep it funky. Education, gentrification. That was the thing. So in certain magnet programs, the bus would come in pick you up. You got to wake up mad early. And then you will go far, far, far away from where you grew up to go to these schools. And so as a kid, you just start noticing. No one tells you. It's just something that you pick up, right? So you start noticing as you get closer to the school, the houses are nicer, the cars are nicer. You start seeing like gated fences. And then when it's the end of the day and you start going home, all of a sudden, quality of the housing start to go down a bit. Next thing you know, you seeing everybody laundry hanging outside, drying, and you ask yourself, why is that? Then you look around, no one else is on the bus because everybody else got dropped off earlier. So it was stuff like that that kind of made me earlier aware that there's a difference here. I don't know. And because of my unique situation growing up isolated, and just to clarify, I don't mean isolated as if my parents like gate kept me from the world. It's more so with their own limited capacity of what they could expose to me was so spread thin that it was out of protection and hope. So it's no matter what it looks like, you got to get an education. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know what? You're probably going to be in certain circles where everybody has an advantage. So you got to work like 10 times harder. Matter of fact, these are the opinions people may think of you. They may never have entered those conversations or in those circles, but they just assumed that's what it was going to be like. So that kind of feeds into everything.
So were you the only child, or did you have siblings?
Man, I'm the youngest born. I am the youngest born. I got three
Okay.
older siblings, one with autism, and I only highlight because it says a lot about me personally, the way I'm always open to people. I never judge, being very patient, which led as a benefit to my community when I entered the poor community liaison portion of my life. So that's kind of how it's been. I've always been seen as the person that made it the furthest, not out of gloat or anything. It was more so I was not involved in a lot of things due to my own projection of what my family needed, as far as this ideology that I gotta save them, I gotta save them. Oh, if I do this, this can help them. And looking back, it took a lot of individualism from me, and it was a lot of very extremism of collectivism and putting other people first. So that's kind of like the dynamic of being the youngest.
So how did that feel to kind of shoulder that blame? I mean, I've heard from other people like that, and even other cultures, like from Hispanic cultures, and some of my friends who are Asian descent, things of that nature, that sometimes your family's like, okay, I need you to be successful so we can be successful. Like your success is our success. How does that make you feel as a person? How does it make you feel about, like, how does that make you feel as a child and even just as a person when it comes to feeling all that pressure from people who are older than you and supposed to be taking care of you?
That's a good question. Hey, we're getting deep now. All right, so there's so many ways I could approach that question. The first thing I would say is guilt. You feel a lot of guilt for things that you do not know. And I am very fortunate enough to be blessed with a sister, Latasha Bianca Catisse Powers Green, who has, and Lorenzo Jamal Green, who has the ability to reflect on how we were raised growing. And the reason why I want to take the time to acknowledge that is they were able to tell me that I was treated differently, and also acknowledge that they treated me a certain way because of the way my parents treated me. This is not to paint the picture that I was favored by any means. There's a lot of discussions within Black families, just going based off of my own, where the acknowledgement of how siblings were treated or favored in certain lights is not as of an open conversation until like later. Usually when somebody dies. Thank God, and I'm very blessed, we all still here to have those conversations, right? So it was a lot of, hey, I just want you to know this is how you think because our parents used us as guinea pigs. So that guilt part that I was mentioning, you immediately would feel that. Like, I had no idea. Or in a darker sense, you might come to the observation that they don't like me for some reason. I don't get that. Why is that? why are they just automatically just assuming I was favored? And you think about all the hours you put in to succeed in certain
Hmm.
areas. And then there's a lot of gaps that you're unable to fulfill. And so I'm very blessed to have that conversation with my siblings. But it was very hard. It's very hard. I could a lot about that question specifically, but that kind of captures how I kind of processed that, where it was, do they not like me? They don't mess with me. I can't really tell. You keep it to yourself. The moments you mention it, because we were all young and not emotionally mature. When they tell you, it feels like they're lashing out to you. You know, so it's
Hmm.
well, everybody loves you, and you don't know what that means, or well, we used to do this, but then I don't know. I took a couple licks. Parents got into an argument, so when you came along, it was never a thing. And so that's kind of how that dialogue came.
I think it's very interesting seeing that, even being in the older sibling myself, is that your younger siblings a lot of the time, and me and my brother are close in age. We're only 4 years apart. But I've seen, especially in other families where they have a bigger difference, is that the youngest kid is getting the best version of their parents. You know, their parents may have had 3 or 4 kids before, or all these other kind of things, and gone through the really tough part. So then when they get to that part, they're realizing, oh, why they're being so soft on this kid. Like there's times like I love my brother, but there's times where I've been sitting there like, I had to do that when I was a kid. He doesn't have to do that now. And I felt moments where I was like, well, how come it's not the same? I thought it would be the same. But then I just realized my parents just, they changed with time. The stats, like the way things were held at the house were changed differently, but also that my brother's a different person than me. So things that worked better for me when it came to discipline don't work for him, and vice versa. And it's just something that they have to figure out. But I can't imagine if my mom had a fifth or sixth kid, like how much different their life would have been versus mine, just even depending on their individual characteristics, and just my parents being older and having a different viewpoint of life. So I'm sure it's probably things like that that are present in what's going on with
Yeah,
your
I
life.
used to be envy of the oldest child a lot of times because when you're the first, it's more intimate, I would argue. Just from the youngest person, it's cool that you're the oldest so we can bounce different perspectives. But I would look at it as, but mom and dad were more hopeful when they had you. By the time the youngest came along, it's a sense of urgency. You know what I mean? It's a lot of you know what? As soon as they see the best of qualities from themselves, talking about the parents, they kind of like push everybody else, right? Like, don't talk to him. He's busy. No, none of that. And then you automatically get boxed, and then you get isolated. And then socially, people recognize that as, that's the mama's baby. Oh, that's the baby boy. Oh, there's like this sense of protection, and people think of that as
Hmm.
a bonus. But from the youngest standpoint, it's, you get to hear all these stories about how the family used to be, and then you start asking yourself, well, why isn't that the case? Like they would say, oh, we used to go to grandma's house. I'm like, oh, man, y'all did? Oh yeah, by the time you was born, they died, so you missed out. And so you're just
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
left with these stories and these myths, or when you hear things like, a mom used to be this way, a dad used to be
Hmm.
this way. Because by the time it's like the youngest turn, it's okay, we kind of get how to raise the kids. So they're the
Hmm.
most untainted by early parenthood mistakes. So they kind of push that onto you. But then you start to feel the rift between your siblings. Like, why aren't they getting the same passes as you? And some people assume the youngest don't see that. But that could just be me.
Hmm.
Everybody's different.
Absolutely. I think it's just really interesting because seeing someone who's my age, who's the youngest, versus me being the oldest at my age, it's just it's just crazy to see because I mean, even like I remember my dad very well when I was 4. My brother's like, I have no recollection of who he was at that time when we lived in that place because I was so young, and it's crazy. I'm like, oh, you don't have that. You've never experienced him at that level like how I
Right.
have. So you only see him from this point on, and I see him from like all the way this whole point, and it's just very different. And it's just something that's very interesting because other than like maybe family videos and stuff, you don't see that. Like I even think about when you take with your first kid, it seems like with parents, they take a picture of everything, the first thing you eat, the first
Yeah.
thing you happen, whatever. But then my little brother, there's like all these gaps because they've like seen that
Right.
before. You know what I mean? So it's different, and you just never realize. Like it's like this is the very first new thing versus this is the first time for this person, but we've seen these kind of
Right.
things before.
Especially when the underrated component of the firstborn and the middle. Not saying those two are always at odds, but
Hmm.
the and we started to get into the social science of it. There is a competitive nature that is unspoken about that. Because you're born, everyone's already
Absolutely.
got this thing about them, and then you're like, you walk in, it's like, I gotta be the best. Not because I gotta prove myself, it's just sometimes the siblings don't always give you that grace, and I was in a unique situation because I had a brother with autism. And with autism,
Hmm.
he was nonverbal and he was also have age regression. So essentially, I was acting as the older sibling at the same time being the
Hmm.
youngest. So there was a lot of things I would fall into as far as trouble would go. And then everybody would be like, why did you do that? Why did you not know X, Y? You are the baby. I guess you wouldn't know that. Dang, I just assumed because there is a level of ownership, of
Hmm.
responsibility, and maturism that you take when you're trying to fit in and as well as take care of people with special needs. So that was like the unique situation. But that's where the competitive spirit started. Because then it's like when the oldest messes up, I don't know if you've been in this situation. Oh, look at the oldest. You see that? You see how you're messing up, but the youngest was able to do X, Y, Z? Is this the best example? You want to lead? And then,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. And so the oldest looking at
They want to do everything like you. Don't do that because then he'll want to do
you,
that.
and then the youngest is like,
You got to be the big
and I
brother.
feel
All that.
bad, but it makes you shy about, and this was my case, it made me shy about my accomplishments. Because every time I did achieve something, it was compared to my older siblings, and
Hmm.
that was the thing that was always missing that we weren't able to identify until we got older, where it was you just had it so it's like a narrative to say that I had it easier or things like that.
You had it the
It's
best.
like
But you had the best time. It was
like
easy
what?
for you. It wasn't tough at
We
all
all
for you.
like I did not have my own room until college. Like you got beings right next to me. I was not about to do what you just did. It was not like I had some secret past or anything like that. But those are the conversations that I'm still glad we were able to hash out at this age.
No, I mean, and that's awesome. I think it's very important. I think family's super important. My family's been very important to me, and like even me and my brother. Like I don't want people to compare us because we're just very different people, and what success looks like for both of us, two very different things. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And you mentioned before a bit about the social science of the competitiveness. So I know you've been to school for something that wasn't marine science. How have you learned about things like social science and even when it comes to the thespianism, all that, when it comes to your career with ocean conservation? So how did all that go? How'd your college career go? And how'd you end up transitioning to this part of your life?
Brother. I was heartbroken. It broke my heart the more I got into the social science, for sure. For sure, for sure. And I'm a very transparent person, so I'll tell you, everything up until this point, I always felt like I was a mistake, right? And a lot of people immediately jump in, no, you're not. You're right where you're supposed to be. Nah, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. That was not the case. There's a lot of things that happened in my life in the social science where it all starts with how you're introduced to something. That's like social science, not 101, but it is a starting foundation to understand like where are you when you're introduced to things. At first, I had no idea that I was a first generation college student. I thought first generation meant my older sister. I had no idea I was still a first generation person being the youngest. That part was not told. So when we talk about transparency, and I know we attended BIM's 2024, shout out plug. We attended the session about science communication and transparency. on a grassroots level, that's where it's really important because in high school, and this is all just context to answer the question. So in high school, they said if you join all these clubs, it will factor in if you do not perform well in a certain class. So I wasn't good at
Mhm.
math. So I thought, oh, I joined all these clubs, that should matter. But every time I applied to a college, they were like, math scores, right? And my mom, who had a very forward thinking, she's only grabbing at what she's been told. So she was told that if you got a sibling that went to college, that increases your chances of going. At that point in my life, I haven't seen my sister in years, right? Because she's older, she already moved on. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna go to Virginia State because my sister went there. They said no.
Mhm.
I said, oh, Hampton University. I volunteered. They said that mattered. You volunteering. No. So I say all this to contextualize things. Going into it, I didn't know where I was gonna go to college. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I really didn't. I was in DECA, FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America. I thought I was going to go the business route. And I kept applying to colleges and I kept getting rejected. What they also did not mention was in high school, was that you had to pay to apply to college. They
Yeah.
never told me that. So growing up financially disadvantaged, I felt weary asking my mom, yeah, I need another $75. And when my mom went again, like it just does something to you. So it made me not want to
Mhm.
ask. So how did I even get to school? I went to school because they had a open enrollment at a high school where a bunch of universities came to this high school, set up in different classrooms, and they just went through the enrollment process right then and there. So we went. I went to Denby High School. There was a personal thing. I'll be transparent. I'll be transparent. Just in case anyone can relate. So there was someone I was not welcoming to meet that was there. Some high school beef over a girl. You know how it goes. So my mom just pulled me into a room. And when she pulled me into the room, the administrator said, oh, if you can shut the door. And I was already in my head. I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. What? Business administration? Sign off. And I just signed off. I didn't even know what school it was. I saw UVA. I was like, sure, that's fine. It wasn't until it was time to visit the school when my parents went, that's not in Charlottesville, that's in Wise, Virginia. And I ended up at UVA Wise, Virginia. And apologies, it's a long-winded answer, but going into it, I didn't know you had to pay for books. I didn't know that at all. I had an opportunity in theater where the thespian background comes into play in high school, where I stopped theater because I was told if I assisted someone for the debutante, that there was a stipend for college books. And I was just trying to help my mom. I didn't know what that actually meant was I was the escort. They were the debutante. So I never got that stipend. So going into
Wow.
transparency, the whole theme of this whole thing, just transparency. So when I went there, they were like, you have $500 for credits for books. So I'm like, okay, accounting one, $700. Oh, hold up. I can't even get any other book. Oh, no, we're going to go undecided. We're just going to go undecided. But the way I communicated, people say, you talk very well. And this kind of introduces me to like microaggressions and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So with that, they said, I can see you selling cars. And that like,
That is
man,
crazy.
listen, that made me hot. That made me hot. I was like, oh, nah.
You a used car salesman? That's all they see out of you? That's
Man, I'm
crazy.
saying, like, you just talk so well. You could sell me a car. And I was like, oh, nah, we ain't about that. We ain't about that at all. And so I went undecided. And then they were like, just do communications. But at the time, I didn't know we didn't have a communication discipline at school. What we had was communication studies, which is a different discipline than mass communications. So when I did that, I got introduced to rhetoric analysis, mixed research studies, qualitative anthropology. We were introduced to journalism, but only as an elective, like only on a very basic level. That digital marketing, thus and so. Towards my senior year, this is when COVID happened. So when COVID happened, I had my first ever fellowship. It was with the studies of the Funds for American Studies, and it was a fellowship in
Mm-hmm.
journalism and communication. And I was supposed to live in D.C. I was supposed to live in government housing. I was supposed to take a class at George
Mm.
Mason. All the perks, all the works. And it was the first time I had like a scholarship. I was proud. It was like my first time ever. And then COVID was like, nah, nah.
You was puffing your chest out and
Man,
excited too and everything,
a
huh?
little bit, a little bit. On a personal note, I was telling, the people at the time as I was learning my way through relationships, like what you thought was me being unavailable was really the dedication and the hard work to ascend myself, and things of that nature. And as you can see, this is the ironclad proof of that hard work and dedication. And then COVID was like, yeah,
Hell nah.
unfortunately, none of these teams have ever handled virtual learning. And so,
No.
because of that, I didn't get the opportunity that I thought. And
Mm-hmm.
so when that happened, I did it from home. And then when I graduated, I was at McDonald's. I was flipping burgers. And my manager was like, so you're back. And that put a whole damp on who I thought I was being the first to graduate. They was like, oh, he's back. And look at you, back at the grill. You're not even a manager, right? And I was flipping burgers. And I was like, you know what? Tired of this. And then I was flipping burgers at Wendy's because they paid better. I didn't have to shave my beard. You know how, I don't got to shave my beard. I can make 850 versus 725 with my college degree. Oh yeah, we on one. We up now. And so when that happened, I was applying everywhere and I was just getting rejected. I was sending my resume out, getting rejected. And I didn't even know at the time that fellowships were for recent grads. Like, that was never explained during my senior capstone at all. So I applied everywhere, and then I got a call back. And when I got the call back, they said, you have the interview. And at that time, what also was not explained was the difference between screening and an interview. And so, hold on, because somebody just knocked on my door and I don't know who that is. Sorry, that was a wrong door situation. I first thought I had the opportunity. I didn't know it was just screening. So I was telling mom, like, hey, guess
Mm-hmm.
what, mom? You don't got to worry about me no more. Like, I got it. Interview, this, that, and the third. I didn't know that was all screening. And then they said,
Mm-hmm.
nah. But you know what? We will keep you in our thoughts
In
until
mind.
next time. And so at that time, I was working at a call center pretty much. It was at a law firm, and I was handling garnishment cases, which wasn't the most fun. The official title was data entry clerk. Others will call it an assistant to the attorney. And so when that happened, I was sad. I was depressed. And then I got a call back one day, and they said the person we were going to go with, they didn't want the job. Are you still interested? And at that point, I was at my breaking point. So I said, yes, yep, absolutely. We went through the interview. Do you love the ocean? Yup, sure do. Love it, love it. Can't think of nothing else. So every day, 8 ounces a day. That's what the doctor said. I was just saying yes to everything. And that's how I landed my position. I was like, absolutely. They were like, are you an advocate for the beach? I don't go to at that time. I didn't go to the beach. Uh, Swimming all the time. I can't swim, so I was like, absolutely. And so that's how I got introduced to ocean conservation, marine science, and things like that. It was really just I just got dropped into a position and made the most of it. But where I was fortunate was we were tackling things on the ocean justice side or the port justice side. And so that was the marriage that I needed for the social science, STEM science coming together. And I was able to find my way. But that's just the full, complete context of my unorthodox way into this space.
No, I'm glad you shared that. I'm wondering, have you ever thought for a second during your career, like especially getting to this point now, that maybe things do happen for a reason? This is like a thing my mom says
Mm.
all the time. Like, if that thing wasn't meant to be in your life, then it's not going to be like things that are meant to be there are going to be easy for you and you're going to love it, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean you have to work, but things that feel right for you at that time are going to feel right for you at the time. Do you feel like you went through all this stuff, even flipping burgers, having your manager sigh at you, people saying that you sound like a used car salesman, all that stuff. Do you ever think that stuff led you to have this moment in time and be where you are now?
On my good mental health days, yes, to be completely fair. On my bad days, I had lots of thoughts of why did it take this for that? I was stuck on that part. But at that point, I had the social science way of looking at things. And what I was soon to become envy of for those in the marine science and ocean science space, it felt like it was easier to escape reality from a STEM field versus reality in the social science field because you
Hmm.
can't turn it off, right? And so it felt like a curse when it got mentally challenging and mentally difficult. It felt cursed. Like when I speak to somebody with a social science like background, it's you try your best not to attach it to something deeper, something larger, something as well this policy in 1999 and kind of influenced this industry which could I could see influencing how you would think about this situation, which is why you are the way you are today.
Hmm.
And you just go through like a whole rabbit hole. And there would be times where I had to learn about my community because I did not know at the time. And that was really hard. Like most notably was I found out my grandma died on some heavy stuff. I found out my grandma died on the job. But what does that mean in this context? What I mean is, I was talking to a professor at Christopher Newport University, and he was showing me a GIS map. And he was saying, look at this area. You see how there's not that many trees, and there's a correlation to the heat, and heat gets trapped in the concrete, and then that heat gets trapped in and then breaks out into the evening. And then I looked at the map and I went, my grandma used to live there. I had a grandma that died from a heat stroke from a really hot summer. And so when we talk about energy shutoffs in the environmental justice space, that's when it became personal, as you can see. That's when I started to attach things. I, prior to this occupation, had no connection to the ocean. Not because I was like, pew pew, the ocean. I had nothing against the ocean. Y'all stay over there. My dry land self, we're going to stay right here. But what ended up happening was when we learned that ocean justice, environmental justice, tackles those that aren't exposed to the water due to a deeper systemic reason. That was the way I could say, you know what? Because I'm in this role now who had no connection, and part of my job is to help bridge that connection to others, it did make the communication a lot more intimate, transparent, and things of that nature. Because then it's like, hey, not on some me being old. I was just like you. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. But more so, I get why you don't think of the ocean. Like, I get it. So when we talk about strategies to connect on the grassroots level, those are where those ideas come from because it's an immediate filter. Hold up, if it's not going to connect to me and I have the privilege to work in this community, it's not going to work on them. And so we were able to be more tactful. And that's when, to answer your question, I was able to say, guess if I haven't been through this, it benefits this. But there's also that survival skill behind it. Like, why did it have to be that way? If everyone had access to these things, could I have been a better person?
So I want to know more about grassroots and what that means. I've heard the term before, but I never know exactly what it entails. Could you explain part of that?
Okay, so grassroots is when we say, boom, I got you, I got you, I got you, I got you, I got you. All right, so if I say, I want to bake a cake on the fanciest of level, where everyone is worried about funders, donors, sensitivity, predominant white audience, whatever case it may be, we might all look at Target is where we're going to get the groceries from. If we were to
Mm-hmm.
say, nah, we need a more regional focus, Walmart. All right, let's get the groceries from Walmart. If you was to say, nah, we really want to get in touch with the fabric that made society the way it is. Let's get to the locals. You might have,
Aldi.
I see all these in other areas. Maybe like Ollie's, which is a hood grocery store classic. You might go to Ollie's, right? Which is in a few areas. Or Giants, which is in a few areas. Or Food Lion, right? Food Lion,
Mm-hmm.
that's local. But we talk about grassroots. Grassroots is we're gonna go into our own yard where we grew the food and we have immediate access to those resources. That's how I would explain grassroots. Or another way to explain grassroots is from its suffix, the root, bottom up, straight from the bottom. No endorsements, no sponsorships, like no nothing. You're about to start day one with no Google, no research. It's community based. There's a cultural narrative you're often led with, personal experience you're often led with. There's a lot of people with academic backgrounds that touch on grassroots, but which is also beneficial and helpful. But in terms of grassroots, those are usually started from those that probably didn't get to that academic status the way that it's framed today. There's a lot of scholars that just aren't fancy, right? There's not a Ben, not
Mm-hmm.
everyone has a Ben Shapiro, for example, in their community or a Cornell West in their community. It's usually just a, man, we had enough of this. So I call him, he called them, and it's like a very organic, as I describe.
Okay. Okay. So kind of from the source, more or less, like from the heart of the community.
Right. Understand everyone on your team is not going to have the same academic resolve that you would have if you were to start. That's very important. There's a lot of stuff, no matter how much, this is like my own personal way of looking at it, no matter how fancy schmancy your degree is, when we talk grassroots, I am not going to say it means nothing. But in my particular experience, more times than not, you're not about to sit up here and use your most fancy vocabulary to communicate with these folks. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You have to approach it in a very delicate way, a boots on the ground approach, as some nonprofits like to proceed with that kind of engagement.
Yeah, and that works 100% into what we do at Black Nerds Matter and even just science communication and in general, because you know how important it is to the people you're making things for them to understand what the hell you're talking about and why it matters, and not you trying to fancify it up and use your Harvard degree to confuse them and make yourself seem self-righteous in that. you know more because that doesn't work. A lot of times the community knows more about what they're dealing with than you do because they've lived through that. You know what I mean? So it's just I appreciate um your perspective on that. And with that being said, I'm wondering, we talked a little bit about academics. How do you feel being thrust into this marine science career and going to BIM, seeing people who are traditionally trained in marine science or ecology? How do you feel you fit into that space? Because me and you were at the same conference doing the same stuff, but I don't know anything about theater. I don't know anything about communication, all that, and I don't know if you've done marine science classes. You know what I mean? So I'm just wondering how you feel when you get to those spaces.
One, since you touched on communication, the way you segued into that question, masterfully done. Masterfully done. Hey, whoever's watching, give my brother a round of applause. He did that very smooth. Very, very smooth.
That's me learning communication on my
Hell
own.
yeah.
I wasn't taught
Hey,
that.
and that's what it's about. That's what it's about. All right, so here's the thing. So when I was looking at everybody else, there's a lot of ego that I gotta leave at the door, right?
Hmm.
Which is very hard. It's very difficult. There's a lot of, and that's that you can't always separate social science going into the space, right? So there have been times, as I just explained to you, how my fellowship was, that was it. When I meet people and they say, oh, yeah, I had this one internship. I was diving in the waters of Antarctica, analyzing the isotopes of icebergs. And then you're just like, what? What are they talking about? When they do that? Where was that at? It started making you think, did I go to the wrong school? Did I did I miss a class when they teach this? Or when you hear people say mental health, that was another thing that took me a long time to wrap my brain around. Because in my community, working two jobs is like normal. You could work two jobs, go to a kickback, and do that every day. And when someone says vacation, they're like, what are you talking about? And so a lot of stuff, that was part of my struggle early on, since week one, was getting my head wrapped around mental wellness and burnout and fatigue. Because there were times where it just felt that, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? And then when the social science comes in, it makes that question even worse. So what does that mean? So on
Hmm.
one end, someone can say, you need to take time to recharge. And then social science would kick in. Did they ever say Martin Luther King took a mental health day? Like, at all? Did Malcolm X? Like, at all? During the entire civil rights movement, who did take a day off? It kind of seemed like this was their life, the good and the bad, right? And so when I would
Hmm.
hear like stories from others, you just start to, well, because I'm not where they're at, there must be something going on in between. And the social science kind of fuels that heavy analysis that honestly is not always necessary, right? So learning how to be in those spaces and find a respect for others was definitely an early challenge. And even when people communicated what they did, when you ask them to explain it, it feels like because you're in the same atmosphere or environment that you just automatically have a certain level of understanding. So there was one time where somebody was explaining coral reef restoration, and I was just like, why? Not to be annoying, like it doesn't wrap around to me. I was just like, but why? Oh, because of this. What if you try that? Nah, that wouldn't work because we would just do this. Huh. Oh, is that like this? Is it kind of like that? And then the person eventually ended up saying, why are you asking? Are you asking just to ask? Like, this is my research. And then it kind of makes you not want to ask. Like, oh, I don't want to come off insulting or anything like that. But because of my background, it was like, and what if this was just a normal kid asking you? And you start personalizing it, which is, as a source for motivation, is good. But as a source of where you get your observation or your takeaway from people, that may not always best serve you. And so that's a very delicate balance that I myself had to learn a lot. When people say, oh, I've been to this country, this country, this country, this country, I never even flown before. So you're just like, how do they just know that? And when they also say that their work touches on underserved communities, you start asking yourself, but how? Not everyone travels. Not everyone has a job to take a mental health day. Not everyone escapes to the islands when their job is difficult. Some people don't even believe that they can fly. And then you're just stuck evaluating your own personal shortcomings, your family, people in your own community that haven't been able to reach this far. And then you just start feeling like you don't belong, which is its own troubling thing. So that's kind of been my thing early on. Now it's just who's got the best idea. Let's find where things intersect. I gotta get to know the person. Whoever you were upstage may be very different than when you get off stage. And so I just had to meet people where they're at to find out if we vibe and if this really is gonna connect with the community.
I think you have a very important voice and space in Black and Marine Science for that very reason, because I think a lot of people forget about how to humanize what they do and make it matter on that level. I mean, something you even said about, well, what if a little kid asks this to you? And that's the thing. Like something I talk to people a lot about is that scientists don't understand how to be people sometimes. And that's not a dig at what you're person you're talking to or anything. I'm just saying, in the way people are taught in this field, it's your work is you and who you are as a person. Defend this with your life. People get PhD in their dissertations. They work all this time for one piece of thing that they have to defend with other people with swords, pretty much saying this is right because of X, Y, and Z. And I feel like it's almost impossible for a person that's been trained this way by society or the institution, whatever it may be, to not see their work as part of who they are. And when you're asking that and giving those questions, and that's something that I've been really happy that I learned, because my mom is someone who's very much has the same perspective as you is, yeah, if I have a question, something I'm going to ask. Like, I'm a very inquisitive person. I'm always going to be like, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And people can be, well, I just want it to be this way, or whatever, or maybe whatever it may be, or kind of they want you to just be they want to just lead you without having to ever explain it. They just want you to follow their lead pretty much. I'm the smart scientist, I do this and this and that, and it's right because of this X, Y, and Z and all these numbers, but it's like, why should I listen? Why does this matter? And I think it's very important for you to be a person there, just anyone, to ask them, because not everybody knows and has been through education, like with the coral restoration, all that kind of stuff. You have to know why they matter, why they affect the ocean, why that affects you. Okay, if these things die, we're going to have more waves coming through hurricanes that'll destroy our cities, destroy our beaches. Then you tell somebody that, they're like, okay, cool. But they don't give a damn about, nitrogen values or isotopes and, all these, or coral bleaching and what it matters. They want to know how that affects them. And you have to speak to them on their terms and bring it to that level. So I can understand why you care so much about your grassroots work, and that your social science and what you've been through affects your experience in that area. So
Oh,
thank you
no
for sharing that.
problem. Because it comes down to the first question: how do you break things down? That will tell you exactly where people subconsciously explain things at. Like that's how they think everyone's on the same level. Like, walk me through it. And there's a lot of things in where it was kind of almost depressing. When I came back home, it was very depressing. Because in school, I went to a liberal arts school, mind you. The entire community discord, Socratic seminar, discord, explaining these abstract concepts. And in the social science, you're encouraged to ask a lot of critical questions that outside of that field sounds insane to ask. Like just recently in media and culture, which is a discipline in this field, one could say Kanye West is crazy. In the social science field, you could say, I don't think so. And to people, wherever they're at, they might get enraged by that thought. But when you say, walk me through it, and then you start going, well, if we look at the framework of Moses Talion, an Italian researcher, everybody hearing this is like, what are you talking about, bro? That got nothing to do with nothing. And the person I just named is made up just to, like, is no one knows you're talking. You gotta like walk them through. And this isn't to attack anybody's education, but or how they compile information. But don't forget, there were people in your classroom that wasn't paying attention as much as you. When you explain
Hmm.
things, you gotta like remember, just in case they weren't paying attention, let me be very detailed in how I explain things. I'm not gonna tell you how'd you get to UVA wise. I'm not gonna tell you, well, first I researched and then I talked to the US Federal Student Aid and they explained this, that, and the third. I won't tell you that. That doesn't paint the full picture. I would say they had open enrollment at a high school. My mom took me. At the time, no one explained that you had to pay for an application. They also said some of these application fees were non-refundable. So if I applied to Wake Forest like I did, that application was $75. Hampton University was $65. North Carolina A&T, $50. So in a span of a week, that was a lot on my mom. I didn't want to ask that. I didn't want to keep asking that. So I applied for colleges that
Hmm.
had free application fees, but they were asking me what my favorite ice cream was, and I was just thrown off. I didn't know how to answer it. When you explain things on that level of detail, to me, it serves people way more better. Because some people may say, I already know what you're talking about. It's best for them to say that than you to assume that they don't. When they say, I'm trying, Leroy, you got a new job. Can I apply to where you are at? I would say, sure. But before you think that I was just handpicked, that is not the case. I just kept applying. This is what my resume may look like. And then in those conversations, you might get reminded they don't know the format for a resume. I skipped that part.
Hmm.
Okay, by me having this unique opinion, okay, they may not know about this historical context as to why I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay, let me go back. And so that's kind of been the thing that's kind of grounded me. And that's one of the pros of being in a field you're not as familiar with, because you got to pull all of your experience to try to make.
Well, that's a very unique perspective. I haven't met anyone in this field that had a story like that. I mean, and part of the reason I interview people on this show that are doing different things is because I don't want this show to just be, Black marine scientists. Obviously, I know a lot of Black marine scientists, but I want it to be nerds of all different levels, shapes, forms, like whatever it
Yeah.
may be. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering about the social science aspect. Is that for you? Does it feel like every conversation is almost like a homework assignment, like, oh, they said this one thing, so maybe they're meaning it in this way instead. Oh, they said this. Does it make you like overanalyze every bit and piece of what someone gives you and try to give it a deeper meaning than what it would be on the surface? Is that how you feel and how you feel overwhelmed by that?
Oh my gosh, I think we feel seen. Absolutely. It is definitely a rabbit hole of thought and constant reflection. I always imagine if I did not grow up the way that I did, would I be a different social scientist? If I grew up in the social scientist field and I grew up in a two-parent household, would I be a whole different person than being in a one parent household? I have someone with
Mm-hmm.
autism in the family. So when we say underserved communities, and then people out here at these workshops and conventions talk about these communities, but the moment you ask your question, it feels as if they're irritated by the constant question after question after question. It makes me think of my brother. So like, okay, and what if my brother with autism was here today? How much about neurodiversity are you aware of? Not that you can't grasp the social complications, but the interpersonal communication, which is its own field of study. And how does it
Mm-hmm.
affect me personally? It's made me, it feels like you get reminded that you're not healed. And there's a lot of things that you just automatically deconstruct when you hear it for the first time. And the balance that I'm on a journey on is to pick and choose when to deconstruct what is being said to me. And an example of that would be, okay, I'm new at the marine science space. Let me just talk to someone in this field. As I'm listening, I'm hearing they went to this school, they got this scholarship, both parents are in their lives, all their siblings are healthy, none of them have a mental issue whatsoever. Somehow, during the scholarship, they befriended a professor, and somehow that led to this opportunity. Now they're on a research boat doing this, and somehow they still have enough time to go to Paris, and they somehow still have enough time to save dolphins on the side, and all these things. When you come from a disadvantaged community, you start to project like a lot. And you don't realize that as you're learning social science. You go, dang, if my mom did this when she was 15, I might have been born and wasn't be able to do XYZ. But you can't always just think
Mm-hmm.
that all the time. It's very exhausting. It's very mental.
It's
You
taxing.
start to you start to knock your own self. Even the whole idea of generational curse. So you graduated, you broke the generational curse. Yeah, but nobody wants to go to college just because I graduated. So you're led to this idea of, okay, I graduated. Now what? Okay, hey, uncle, my cousin's about to enter college. This is what I went through. Oh my God. No, 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 no. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. That sounds awful. I thought you were going to talk about the good things. And then that's that struggle of you're trying to take your experiences, go into the community, share it with them, and then it's not received. And then you go amongst your
Mm-hmm.
peers and you feel like an outsider. And now you just constantly question everything. And it's hard to find yourself in a space that tells you to find yourself, right? Because even now, I could lose my job tomorrow. Because I am so not a marine scientist, I don't know what type of jobs exist. So when people say, you'll find another opportunity, I don't even recall what category this job was under. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it has affected like the personal life, even professionally. You try not to compare, but you can't help it. You feel like an outsider. And from a social science, you start picking apart, but you don't know when to stop. You don't know when that's their story. It's penciled in, should not be touched. It doesn't always need to be analyzed. And that's just some of like the early social science struggles that like I came across. Is trying to figure all that out.
I think I totally agree with a lot of that sentiment as someone who is definitely like a chronic overthinker in my own right. Like it's something I've worked on a lot to be not to not analyze every detail because I always think, okay, but what could I have done better? What could I have done better? And there's times when I always assign blame to myself, and no matter what the situation is. Like a rock could fall out of the sky and destroy my car, and I'd be like, man, if only I parked it a little bit more to the
Right.
right, it wouldn't have happened. Well, and whenever I get a new car, like I'll make sure to always park it a little bit more to the right so that it never gets crushed by a meteor again. You know what I mean? Like I have those kind of thought patterns. And I think it's really hard to know when you're having a thought about something and it's going to be constructive and help you versus when it's sitting there to hold you back and let you go. And that's something that I work with a lot. And I pretty much go into things being like, hey, I'm going to do things the way I want them to be done. And if I fail or whatever happens, at least I'll be happy in the space that I did what I wanted to. Like, even with this platform, like I say what I want to about my life and how it happened. Because I mean, I feel like when people are either going to be, they're going to like what you say, and some people that don't like what you say. But if you tell them the truth, I mean, at least you don't feel that emotional burden. Like if someone's like, oh well, if you say the truth, it's like, well, I mean, that's what happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't feel any kind of way like, hey, you're upset about it, but I didn't say anything that was wrong. I didn't lie. I didn't misinterpret what
Yeah.
happened. And so I think it's really hard to get out of your own head when it comes to things, even just talking to someone like, oh man, what if I did this instead? What if I did this interview earlier? What if I did this? What if I gave them more time? They would have had more to
Right.
say. But I feel like those hypotheticals a lot of times can just put you in your own way. And I think the most important thing to try to do is to stay out of your own way as much as possible. Like obviously learn, try to do things better, but when it leads to no end and you're in the shower thinking about the same thing for the fifth time today, it's like, okay, time to let it rest. But then it's how do you let your mind let it rest?
Man,
You know?
you know how many times I had to decompress and overanalyze after I done spoke to somebody? I had to like just sit by myself. Why did I say that? Why didn't I just say that? What? Ah, crap. See, I wish I knew. I wish I had this opportunity before. I would have known what to say. I would have known what to ask. And it's definitely a mind boggling, especially with the other component is in this space to be a black nerd or a black male, you gotta find the right black male or the right kind of black nerd to be. Where in the midst of all that overthinking that you just articulated, there's also the other part. Am I too loud? Am I taking up too much space? Do I come off too aggressive? Am I too nice? Do I come off as a beta? Do I come off as an alpha? What's their takeaway? Like, do they assume the way that I speak that I grew up in a cul-de-sac? I don't know. Like, I accidentally said the word dang, and one of my peers was like, I didn't know you curse, which automatically feels like you're boxed into a type of perception. Or even the way, or in my experience growing up, am I coming off as Huey Freeman or am I coming off as Carlton Bank? And it's like, how is
Yeah.
my intelligence being perceived? And that's also part of the equation of overthinking how you come off.
And so I'm glad you brought up Black Nerd and what kind of Black nerd you want to be. At Black Nerds Matter, I love asking people what makes them a nerd. How do they feel about their nerdiness? What is essentially their reason for being a nerd? I want to know what makes Leroy a nerd. What do you nerd out about? And what are some things, even fandoms, whatever, that you may love?
Oh man, so the thing that makes me a nerd out is studying media and culture. So I've always been a fan of having deeper conversation, and that's not to
Like this one?
hell yeah, right? Because especially when we get to the heart of it. Because when I would listen to
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
conversations, my ear or my brain just tells me there's a part of the conversation that's not as talked about, which I wonder if introduced, it would change everyone's perspective, right? So,
Naturally, yeah.
like the halftime show, the Kendrick Lamar Drake thing. Like to me, that fascinates me because rhetoric analysis is my concentration. So in rhetoric analysis, it's how is a message formatted, shaped, or perceived by the public to shape one's reality. One of the theories in communication studies is called cultivation theory. In cultivation theory, that is the amount of media that you perceive influences how you see reality. So to break that down, just I'm about to nerd out. So growing up,
Go ahead.
to age myself, I'm 26 years old. When I was a little kid, they kept showing 9/11 all the time. That made me afraid to fly. Mom used to
Okay.
say when you hear the roaring of a plane, I used to hide under my mom because I didn't know it was a terrorist attack. Just to show you how young and
Damn.
just innocent I was, I got confused with Aaliyah's crash with 9/11. So I thought 9/11 happened because the plane was too heavy. That's what I thought. So because of that, I just been afraid of flying. That's cultivation theory. I saw so much media, it just made me the Super Bowl. The reason why the Super Bowl would fascinate me as a social science nerd is because there's so much of the conversation that should be unpacked. So when we talk about colorism, Drake being light skinned or fair skinned, Kendrick being dark skinned, like that's its own conversation. Now, is everyone bringing that up?
Mm-hmm.
No, but that's what sparks me
No.
to want to bring it up, right? When we talk about the entertainment industry, right? You think about Contra Pro. You think about J. Edgar Hoover saying there will never be another Messiah unless we create one. But then you see Kendrick Lamar with the Jesus crown. But you don't see as much media backlash about that. But when Kanye West names an album called Yeezus a long time ago, it received major pushback. It just makes you think about it. It makes you think about how people's interpretation of Kendrick Lamar's halftime show is about freedom of speech, what you can and cannot say. But as soon as everyone came to that understanding of that's what the message was, Kanye West went on a rant. And that's where that social science part, as I was articulating earlier, people start looking at you crazy for bringing that up because they think you agree. They assume that you agree with it, right?
Yeah.
And in reality, it's you just praised Kendrick Lamar about freedom of speech. Kanye West just did an extremism of freedom of speech, and we're condemning that. So what does that say?
Do you really believe that as much as you would like to lead on? Like, do you really want that, or is it only okay if it falls within this threshold? Once you go over 50%, we don't want it, but you stay below 50, we're happy with it.
Right. And
Yeah,
when
I
people
get you.
say, well, there's probably things Kendrick couldn't say, you mean capitalism? So it is about the money. But I thought if that's how he moves business wise, isn't that the same criticism for Drake? How he approaches the business? Because Kendrick Lamar didn't say the actual words either. So this one could say, and this is just me picking apart everything else, but in terms of like the origin, because I want to make sure I don't go on a rabbit hole on that. But
No, no, it's okay. It's
as
okay.
far as that's like one of the things that you just pick apart. Like, okay, I see the imagery, right? When we talk about the chain of messaging, which is pretty much the timeline of media captured events, on one end, when Kendrick Lamar was at the BET Awards, he was in chains, right? Everybody was in, he was talking about so many things. And at the end of the performance, it's had a symbol of Africa and Compton. So if that's where he stands, then all of a sudden, not like us, what does that mean? You think about colorism. You think about the difference, right? Well, he tailors, he's not, well, Drake isn't a rapper. He's a pop artist. Well, if he's a pop artist, then why is Tupac Shakur in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That's not a rap Hall of Fame category. It just makes you think why we pick and choose certain things. But where did this nerdism start? It starts off when you're left alone to your own devices. My original nerd, my original nerd thing was robots. I was a huge Mega Man, NT Warrior, Bionicle, Legos, things like that. And just to,
Okay. Yeah,
just to
yeah,
give insight to my upbringing, it seemed like a waste of time. And when I say waste of time, I do not want to imply that my parents discouraged me from pursuing my dreams. My father would say, well, if God wants you to be that, then it's up to him. It's not up to you. But as a kid, you don't know how to like process that. So I could say, oh, I want to be a robotic engineer. Well, if that's not in God's plan, then you're going against God's plan, and then you'll burn in hell. And that's the rhetoric that was used. And so it just made you like be fearful to approach certain careers. And then as you get older in the evolution of a nerd, because my siblings would get in trouble, I couldn't interact with them because that was the way the house politics kind of ran. So I just found myself reading a lot. And that's when my imagination came in
Mhm.
about. So shout out to anyone who knows Magic Treehouse. That was my book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
There was
love
a
those
book
books.
about
Yeah, yeah. I still have the Egypt one in my
my
room.
man. Right. So that's where the imagination came in. Or there was a book about cats being from different clans and they had these superpowers. There was a book like The Little Indian in the Cupboard, where the toy Indian goes in the cupboard and it comes out and it's alive. And that's where a lot of the imagination came in. And at first I thought being a nerd is what you were supposed to be, right? Is where the cultivation theory starts playing, unknowns to me. So I thought black intelligence was something to be celebrated. Because on one end, that's what my mom made sure to push. Like, you need to read. Did you know Martin Luther King went to college and he was this age? And this is something to be revered. But when I went to public school, you get bullied for stuff like that. You get
Yeah, for trying to be the smart kid and be liking the weird stuff
yeah,
or the out of the box thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. You get called like a nerd, or somehow your masculinity and your intelligence has to be in a certain space or it's not going to be recognized by
hmm
most.
Even like sexuality and stuff like that, like, all this different
Right,
stuff.
right, 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 right. I remember um I said something nerdy and somebody was like, you know what? Just because I want to respect your platform, I'm not gonna say what they actually said. So I'm gonna pick another example. There was another example of I had an interest in a field, and I was told by a relative, "Does that pay the bills? Like, does that? What you gonna do that at? Like, where in Newport News does that career even exist?" And it just makes you rethink. Or when you would say, "Why does I thought everyone wants us to be this educated person?" And then you start looking at how people gravitate towards Will Smith versus Carlton Banks. And then you start seeing that there's a difference. When you're told to be respectful, a good guy, somehow being a good guy is roped into being a nerd. So growing up watching Family Matters, I was like, why does everyone approach Steve Urkel this way? Like, I don't get that. That seems kind of whack. Then he becomes Stefan, and everybody just automatically loves the guy, and it was just so perplexed. So the evolution of being a nerd had a lot of self-damaging of who you want to be. And sometimes I feel like it's up
hmm
to the man upstairs of who you become at the end of it. But in my personal journey, it's definitely been a roller coaster ride of like how you want to be perceived. Like Huey Freeman, a Boondocks character growing up, to me was like the coolest smart guy that I thought of at the time. But everybody on the show was like, Huey, you're wrong. Ooh, you're the party pooper. So then there'll be times you want to speak on certain things, but you don't want to because you don't want to be the party pooper. But then when things go bad, people say we need more smart black people. And then it's like an interesting paradigm. And then you just find yourself from time to time on different ends of that.
And that's something I like about the Boondocks, especially because everybody's pretty much a caricature of whatever it may be. Like Huey has things that you would see as good traits, but he's not like the perfect anything. Riley has things you might think are bad, but he does a lot of good stuff. Granddad, Uncle Ruckus, like all these different people are just kind of caricatures of different people, especially with Huey. It's you see this, this smart black guy and all this stuff, but you also see other things he's doing, like being radical for no reason or attacking people or just assuming, just beating somebody up in the
Right,
street because he disagrees with
right.
them, that kind of stuff. So it's just, I think it's great to have media like that because it shows that like these different archetypes, but nothing's inherently wrong or right. These just are who our people are, and we just have different Black people that have been to all these different things, and we all make up like this community. But nothing's right and nothing's wrong. But you have to decide which one you most align with.
Especially in our community, because if we were just to take Boondocks as a basis to bounce off this conversation, historically, if you look at what occupation in the Black community was highly valued at the time, right? You would say being a doctor, being a lawyer, a dentist. You know, you might watch Family Matters, not Family Matters, you might watch Good Times. Shout out to Good Times. You might watch Good Times, and the James Evans' daughter might be dating the dentist. And on one end of the fence, it's like, oh, she's dating the dentist. Our baby done made it. Like
Yeah, made it.
that's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
me. Or if you look at it another way, why is it the youngest, Michael from Good Times, is perceived as highly intelligent than everyone else? But he's also light skinned, right? JJ is the comic relief, right? But and this is the social science part of where you just nerd out about it, where the people that are comic relief on a show shows intelligence, but in a different way. And then we lump it
Hmm.
into the neurodiversity spectrum. We say, oh, JJ, as we come to find out, he just had ADHD. Or from the Bill Cosby show, his son, right, Theo. Theo had a long history of getting into trouble, not understanding things, being late, being deemed irresponsible. Then they found out he had a learning disability. So it's stuff like that that just makes you look at how intelligence is being perceived. Because even in Boondocks, to center that example, Mr. Dubois, right, the lawyer,
Hmm.
his name is
Hmm.
Dubois, as in W. Dubois. So the fact that he's this lawyer with a white wife and the way that he behaves appears to the naked eye that he's not the most alpha masculine individual. Not everyone agrees with Tom. The fact that his name is Tom, further playing into the
Uncle
Uncle Tom,
Tom.
my brother, right? So when you look at all of that, it makes
Yeah.
you pick and choose what kind of intelligence. People would say in the underserved communities, a lot of people's heroes are on television, mind you, right? And even in
Hmm.
the history books, you're almost trained to believe you can only be a nerd to a certain extent. You can only speak out with your intelligence or you get assassinated. And then it's like, well, I don't want to end up like that, right? So you might say,
Yeah.
I gravitate to Riley because he's smart, but street smart. Or people say, I want to engage in conversation because I'm attracted by intelligence and I want my mind to be stimulated. But if you approach it like a Huey Freeman, then you're controlling, then you're a monger,
Party pooper.
man, all these things. And it
Yeah,
plays
yeah.
into how do you want to be perceived. You could be grandpa, right? Or granddad, but that's more of a conservative old mind. And then there's the culture clash of that. So definitely it is an interesting thing how our black youth interprets intelligence, if we use that as
Yeah, I totally think that being a media nerd is really a big deal. Like, I mean, especially with all the things out now with YouTube and different people doing these media analysis, what this thing means for this thing. And I can see you enjoying that because I enjoy those things as well. I like to see why, okay, this character does this and this in the show, but what can that mean to a greater thing? Because I like to think deeply about it. I mean, I think about stuff deeply too much because I get in my own head about whatever it may be, but it's nice to see that other people can draw these conclusions from these different things and have these other parallels as well. So I'm happy to have you on the show for that reason as well. And with that, I want to ask you a final few questions. Don't want to take up too much of your time today, but if you could give any advice to someone from a non-traditional background looking to enter ocean conservation, what would it be? If you'd like to touch on the next parts of your career, what that might look like for you, and where can people follow your work and stay up there on what you've been up to? Because the stuff you're doing is really cool, and I'm sure plenty of our viewers would love to hear more about you and what's going on in your life, even after this.
I always ask myself, what should I tell people? If you are from a non-traditional background in this space, I want to say love yourself. It's gonna get wild. I'm not even gonna talk to Mr. DJ. I'm gonna talk exactly to whoever needs this answer. Hey, listen, gang, it's gonna get wild. There's a lot of stuff that they do not teach you. How do you learn about these new concepts when at the time that you're learning it, it also reveals mysteries you've always had about yourself and your family? That is a very hard thing to walk through. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself very much. Don't be intimidated. Do not be intimidated. Because at the end of the day, the way I try to look at it, it's just a video game you just not have not played yet, right? And if you remember, if I lose to, let's say, Diedrich in Mortal Kombat, well, he's been playing this for a long time. I can't expect to be good. Don't doubt yourself when you lose. Just be more inspired. Be as inspired as you can be. If you end your academic endeavors or ventures at the undergrad level, that doesn't mean all the answers are going to come to you. That doesn't mean you have to have a master's or a PhD to make it in this world, because that's not the case. Find your niche, find what you're good at, and stay with it. A lot of people will intimidate you from their experiences, and you're going to try to compare it to your own. Just understand that you survived everything that people don't know about you. That's something I'm learning myself. Just remember that you lived up to this point. Kept yourself alive. Not everyone's gonna love you when you finish college. I thought me taking everything I learned, bringing it back to the hood, would serve me. It did not. That's okay to say. You are not a sellout. Whoever's listening, you are not a sellout if you're like, this isn't for me. After all those struggles, it doesn't mean it's worth nothing. It's all valuable. When you get into the marine science space, you might find yourself at a conference. And guess what? They're going to ask for donations. They're going to ask for money. Somebody like me, I've been asking for bread all my life. Make no difference to me. It's just a different way of looking at it. Everybody's going to ask. Everyone's going to ask for ideas to engage with the community you just left. There's people on the PhD level that are saying we're trying to find ways to engage with inner city youth. You might be an inner city youth kid. They talking about you. And you thinking just because you got an undergrad or no degree, you can't answer that. Yes, you can, because they don't know it. And they have a PhD. Just because they got a PhD means they're knowledgeable in a very niche subject. That does not mean they are Einstein in everything else. So remember that about yourself. Stay grounded. Be humble. Don't be afraid to speak out when you don't know something. There's a lot of mental work to be done because it feels like every time you project you don't know something, it's a knock against anything you've done in your career or your educational career. And I just want to let you know there's a place. There is a place where all that matters. Where all that matters. A sword is still a weapon. Even in a gunfight. People say you brought a knife to a gunfight. It's still a weapon. Don't let them change it. Don't let them change it. Do not let them change it. It's all about how you wield things. As far as my next journey, leads to be foreseen. There is a show that was going to be developed explaining ocean justice and resilient stories and conservation. I feel as if we're able to take those stories, make them more mainstream, and make people more inclined to be curious about it, it would serve us very, 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 very well. And I remember I grew up with no cable. I would wake up on PBS Kids, and there was a show about the Revolutionary War. I forgot the name of the show, but they used to, I think it was called American Liberty or Liberty something. and it was these kids navigating through the.
Oh, Liberty
You know
Kids?
that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. All
Yeah.
right, so boom. That show right there made me curious about history. Rather, I wanted to agree with it or not. Tim and Moby talking about science on
Mhm.
some level made me curious. So I say that to say, as a matter of fact, there's a show called Curious George, all about curiosity. Remember that. Your story is worth every accolade that you see. Don't get caught up in the comparisons what everybody else was able to accomplish. Remember, everything you've been through made you unique. Every experience allowed you to go through certain things. There's people that at these conferences have the craziest anxiety about speaking in front of everybody, but you might feel comfortable. But you got to be there for them. And in those moments, remind yourself that you could be up there and you could do it. Don't get discouraged by title or how much people make. You're going to get a crazy headache. But that's kind of like my ultimate message. I always contemplate what the strongest takeaway was. There's no streamlined way. There's no traditional linear pathway to certain career field. It could be unorthodox like me. I just applied, kept trying, got a call back, but I seized the opportunity, right? But make sure in those moments you're able to explain that to folks. Don't dress it up. Just explain it. I don't want to lead on false pretense. Explain how you got there, be honest about it, and own it, and let them know you see the opportunity to be where you are. As far as the web series show is concerned, it's still under development because the way these stories need to be told, it has to be very delicate. There's a framework of storytelling I'm going through where fighting between being edgy and being as yourself as you can be, but there's also a professionalism and an academic voice that you want to still have on the show. And so that's where things are at the moment. I'm currently on a social media break, but follow Deidre, if anything. Follow Deidre. He's amazing, up and coming, rising, grand star, north star. He's going to do amazing big things, big things, big things. I'm still finding my way in this space, and hopefully, wherever you are out there, you are. That's my main message.
Thank you so much, man. We're definitely gonna have to have a second episode on here with you. I feel like there's still so many things that we could talk about. I think we could talk for hours, but I can only sit in this hot ass closet for so long, doing these interviews. Yeah, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your insight and just your level headedness when it comes to these different things. A lot of things that I've thought of myself. I'm glad we had time to connect in person in San Diego and all that stuff, just get a chance to talk about this because I mean, this stuff is important. It's cool to just have other people that are interested in what you're interested in and like to talk and think deeply about things that matter to them. So yeah, thanks for giving me space to overanalyze stuff, and I'm glad I was able to give you space to overanalyze stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But yeah,
Hey, if you catch Deidre at the airport, hound that man. Because I'm still trying to figure out where he got that neck pillow from. Because it looks so comfy on that flight to Besley. And so, yeah, hound that man. Transparency all the way. I try to buy me a little neck pillow. And I had a stiff neck by the time I got off the flight. So, yeah, hound that man.
all right, guys, thank you so much. To support the show, make sure you are subscribing on YouTube, following our Instagram page, following on Spotify. We still have links to our merchandise online on the Instagram page. You can check that out. You can use our Cash App to sponsor episodes or want specific topics covered. You can always email me or DM me about it, or you want to be a guest on the show. So thank you guys so much for joining and listening today. And Black Nerds Matter is out.